Welcome back to Shinsen Sports, where the talk is fresh and so are the hosts. My name is Trey.
And I'm Fred.
And we are back to bring you the freshest sports and news. So I feel like the biggest topic right now is NBA free agency, something we talked about a little bit last time, but we're going to take a deeper dive in right now.
Okay. So where do you want to start?
I feel
a lot of player movement since the last time we got together.
A lot of player movement, a lot of, a lot of front office kind of things, Damian Lillard requesting a trade.
Right.
Even Lonzo Ball being placed on the disabled list to free up some more cap space for the Bulls.
Looks like he may be done.
He might be out of the picture completely now in his career. But
his brother got a big contract the other day.
Right, $250 million.
Yeah, something like
that. And that, I feel like we could start there because that's something we talked about last time. The next steps for the Charlotte Hornets, and we talked about how LaMelo Ball is the point guard that the Charlotte Hornets are expecting a big career out of.
Wow.
I think the Charlotte Hornets are an interesting team because they don't have much star power. They're just a young team trying to build up, whereas another great, not great necessarily, another big thing I feel like we could talk about when it comes to these young teams and these young players is what were the Houston Rockets thinking, right? We talked about the top 3 picks in our last podcast, but they just picked with their 4th pick Amen Thompson. He's a point guard out of what it was called Overtime Elite, I believe. Mm-hmm. It's another one of those G League Ignite kind of circuits for basketball. And you go out there and you give Fred VanVleet the biggest contract he's had in his career, who's proven to be decent, but he's not a big money kind of player.
Right. And more than likely a product of the system in Toronto. Mm-hmm. I don't know that what he did is necessarily going to translate into a similar result with the new team. It doesn't make a lot of sense, especially because I almost feel like they overpaid as well. They're paying him more than what the Knicks paid for Brunson. Granted, on an annual basis, it seems like the cost for players continue to rise, but it seems like comparing Brunson to VanVleet, now the Knick deal for Brunson looks like a real bargain at this point.
Yeah, I mean Jalen Brunson, he had an all-star season last year. I mean he didn't get picked on the team, but still, mm-hmm. I feel like he will do that again and maybe get it this year. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to the Rockets, they spent $80 million on Dillon Brooks. They spent all that money on VanVleet, and as you said, he was a product of the system on the Raptors. I think he had success winning that one ring with Kawhi Leonard.
Right.
And I mean, he played decent. He's not that big contract kind of player, as I said before. But the main problem I have with signing him is you have just picked Amen Thompson, 6'7" point guard, right? Obviously, you have promise in him if you're picking him with the 4th pick, and you have that guy Kevin Porter Jr., who's a really good point guard. Like, he's a good 6-man kind of guy. And now you have 3 point guards, one that you're paying, like, who are you going to play? Are you going to trade Kevin Porter Jr.?
I'm sure they're thinking of trading at least one of them.
Yeah.
Well, not VanVleet, obviously.
Not VanVleet, and I'm assuming not the 4th pick.
Yeah, right. And so it's got to be Porter Jr.,
mm-hmm.
right? So who knows what they're thinking at this point.
I feel like that's one of those situations where it's like you put a 4-year-old in the general manager's office and you just let him play a game. But it's pretty wild to me. Like, I have no idea what they're possibly thinking of doing.
Right.
Especially when you already have this young team. I remember seeing on social media they talk about it how it's like a AAU basketball team. They're so young that they've all like played each other before. All these guys. You have, as I said, Amen Thompson, Jalen Green. Kenyon Martin Jr. got traded recently. Mm-hmm. You have Jabari Smith Jr. And they just got Cameron Whitmore as well at the 20th pick, who might be considered the steal of the draft. Like, they're a young team, and you're kind of taking steps back with giving these players money.
Right. So, as far as the Houston Rockets, we're a little bit confused as to what their goals are.
But I feel like a non-confusing, maybe in some parts, non-confusing free agency so far would be the Knicks.
Yeah, I think they're taking baby steps. I think they took giant leaps last year. I think Brunson worked out way better than they may have even expected themselves.
Right.
And they brought in another member of the 2016 NCAA championship team, and in DiVincenzo.
Right.
To team up with Hart and Brunson. I know Hart is now trying to recruit Bridges to come across town from Brooklyn into Manhattan. I don't know if that's even a possibility, but you and I were kicking around the idea if the Nets are willing to move Bridges, whether an R.J. Barrett straight up for Bridges would be something that the Knicks should consider, or even the Nets should consider. From the Nets' perspective, you're getting a younger player by approximately
3 years.
3 years, 4 years. I think he's only 22 or 23 still. That's Barrett, and then Bridges, is 3 years older. But he's got this impressive, at least college pedigree. Along with his running mates from that team. So sort of an interesting idea. Your thoughts on that?
I think that when it comes to the Knicks versus the Nets right now, the Nets are a team, Bridges or Barrett, unless they get a miracle in free agency this year, are a team that's going to be out of the playoffs for the next 3 seasons or so.
Right. They're rebuilding.
Right. And Bridges is a player who's already been to the NBA Finals when he played for the Suns.
Right.
And when it comes to the Knicks now, the Knicks made it to the second round last season for the first time in however many years.
Right.
Now they're trying to become a win now team. When you have Bridges, who has proven to shine in his role in Brooklyn, who's helped a team get to the finals before in the Suns back when they lost to the Bucks in 21, I believe. I feel like that's the player you want over R.J. Barrett right now, because RJ he played well in the playoffs, but do you want to win now, or do you want to wait for R.J. to have that breakout season, which he's definitely capable of? He's shown a lot of promise, but I think the Knicks are a win now situation and the Nets are a rebuild situation. I think the Nets have the time to wait to see what RJ turns into, whereas we've seen what Bridges is capable of, and I think it's time. I think it would be good for the Knicks to pick him up, and that would definitely upgrade them in their run in the future.
And surprisingly, their salaries match up. They could be traded straight up from one another because their salaries
I would
are
personally
almost
make that
identical.
trade.
Yeah,
I feel like it works perfectly for both teams.
right. It's just a question as to whether two local teams are willing to make that type of gamble. From a Knicks perspective, granted, they may be trying to win now versus what the Nets are trying to do. So the risk from the Knicks perspective is do they want to see RJ possibly flourish as a Net and become the player that they hoped he would be when they selected him third behind Zion and Ja.
Which he has turned out to be the better pick.
No, now that in retrospect, it looks like he may be the best, since Zion never plays and
Ja can't stay out of trouble.
Is more interested in carrying guns and showing it off. So that's not necessarily a guy you want to count on and build your team around. But
the point is both of them can't stay on the court because one's getting in trouble and one is just unhealthy.
Right.
So. Right. Yeah, I think that the trade would work out perfectly for both teams, and I mean, if they're even thinking about it, it would be interesting to see.
It's an interesting idea, anyway. Anything else interesting as far as player movement and free agency in the NBA?
I would say an interesting thing of player movement would be what we talked about last time in the Suns not having much depth anymore, making a huge run at getting some sort of depth in this offseason, whereas they don't have much money to spend. They landed Yuta Watanabe, former Net, who was leading the league in three-point percentage, loved playing alongside Kevin Durant. They signed a bunch of other big men as well. Keita Bates-Diop, Chimezi Metu, a whole bunch of players. But are these guys enough to really bolster that bench on the team?
Well, then they signed a veteran this morning, right? The Suns got Eric Gordon, right?
Oh, that's right. They did sign Eric Gordon, but once again, are these guys enough to really?
Well, remains to be seen. Who knows that? I mean, Eric Gordon is what? It's got to be at least 35.
Yeah, something like that.
All right, and the other guys are younger players. Watanabe played for the Nets. Who did he play for prior to that? Anybody?
Raptors.
Else? Right. So I mean, has never really played in what I would consider meaningful games.
Mm-hmm.
You know, obviously the Suns are a team that are looking to, you know, compete for the title this year. You know, how these younger support players, you know, react to the pressures of, you know, playoff basketball or really meaningful playoff basketball. You know, that's the big question. That's the real unknown now. Yeah, I guess the Suns are hoping. Obviously, they're hoping that these guys perform at the level that they expect. But you know, until you throw them into the fire, we just don't know how they're going to react. I mean, you take a look at a lot of the guys, the younger guys on the Knicks for the playoffs this year, or they had very nice seasons during the regular season. When it came to crunch time, you know, Grimes, who shot, you know, 35% from three-point range during the regular season, which is, you know, an acceptable percentage. You know, he only shot 24% when the playoffs came around.
Right.
And I think even R.J. Barrett, his three-point percentage went, you know, down by at least 10 points when the playoffs started. So, you know, everybody reacts differently to pressure. So it remains to be seen how these young guys are going to perform when the pressure is on. I think Eric Gordon was a great pickup for them.
I think he's the best.
Yeah.
Obviously, besides Bradley Beal, but
yeah. I mean, he's got a lot of experience. He's got, you know, some playoff experience as well. So I think a very nice pickup. Somebody, a veteran coming off the bench for the Suns.
And I feel like another interesting question to ask about the Suns is they said that they're focused on keeping DeAndre Ayton, but do you think that that's the truth? Do you think that they might try and shop him, get a little bit more out of DeAndre Ayton, who's expressed an interest to play for the Suns?
So I guess, you know, DeAndre Ayton, how old is he now? Still in his 20s, right?
He's probably still in his 20s, but he looks like he's 55.
Exactly. But, you know, he you know, he hasn't had a chance to really, I think,
shine.
Yeah, because I mean, he's always been surrounded by players that are, you know, he's at best now the fourth option, you know, in the Suns, and that's not going to change anytime soon. So I think the question is, have we seen the best of Ayton? Is this as good as Ayton is ever going to be? Or is Ayton better than he's shown? It's just that, you know, he's been limited in his role because he's been surrounded by players that are, you know, let's face it, they're better than he is, especially offensively.
The thing is, they're superstars versus him being, is he maybe an all-star?
Right.
But, I mean...
You know, but it's hard for a young player, let's just call him a young player for argument's sake, you know, somebody still trying.
He was drafted alongside Luka Doncic and Trae Young, who are still considered young players.
So, you know, it's hard for him to really accept a role where he's just setting picks for other guys. And,
to just ISO
and grabbing rebounds. You know, basically asking him to do all the dirty work. Mm-hmm. When, you know, he wants an opportunity to shine as well. And I don't think he's getting as much of that opportunity. So maybe, you know, he would prefer to go someplace else. And if that's the case, and if they're looking for somebody that, you know, all they want from the center is to do the dirty work, grab rebounds, be the anchor on defense, you know, set picks, you know, for Booker and KD and Beal. You know, maybe you could do it for a lot less money than what they're already paying Eaton, and maybe they could trade him for more assets that would help, you know, the core that they built. You know, for the upcoming season. So, you know, let's see what happens with them. Right. I don't think the Suns are finished.
And I think that what you brought up about somebody who could do all that dirty work, there's a very interesting trade idea that I saw is there's a lot of talk of the Pacers shopping Miles Turner and Buddy Hield. Mm-hmm. And I feel like making a package for DeAndre Ayton and getting Miles Turner and Buddy Hield would be very beneficial for both teams, because as we see right now, the Pacers are working on something quite interesting,
right?
Putting a lot of faith in Tyrese Halliburton, giving him a big contract,
right?
And then, you know, basically stealing Obi Toppin from the Knicks
for 2 2 second-round picks.
And Obi Toppin, he proved to be like he's got some value, you know.
Well, I mean, every time he had an opportunity to start or
He made the
play
best of it.
major minutes, he showed what he could do. He's a great athlete. He's not a fluid athlete, though. He's more of a leaper than anything else, I always thought. So I don't know how much better he could be, but I feel like the Knicks never used him well. They never really gave him an opportunity. And, unfortunately, if he does pan out, it won't be for the benefit of
The
Knicks
Knicks.
fans. Yeah.
But as I was saying, like Miles Turner is the perfect example of somebody who you said the Suns would like. Somebody who does the dirty work as an anchor on defense, right? He seems to average 3 blocks every season. And he could stretch the floor too, in worst case scenario of Kevin Durant, Devin Booker needs to kick it out of a rough situation. So I think, and if you pick up Buddy Hield within that trade too, that upgrades your bench.
Then you have Buddy Hield and Eric Gordon as part of your second unit. That's a good start of a decent second unit.
Right, and as I was talking about before, the Pacers are building something there.
Right.
And DeAndre Ayton, still a young player, although he looks 55, as we said before. But that's a good pickup, I think. I feel like that benefits both teams for their mission right now. Similarly to how I personally thought the Nets and Knicks trade would do that too. So there's a lot of things that could happen with equal value for both teams.
So let's talk about something else. Also NBA. Let's stay with the NBA, but something else. I think we've put in enough time on the future of the Suns at this point. I think we figured everything out for them.
Yeah. It's a matter if they listen to us.
Yeah. But let's try to figure out the best case scenario for Damian Lillard, who is at this point the biggest news in the NBA. Whatever happens, whenever it happens, will become the biggest offseason news, I think, for this year. For this year,
right? And yeah, so Damian Lillard requested a trade like 2 days ago from the Portland Trailblazers. Finally, it's kind of a surprise, but not really, because his whole thing is about loyalty. But
he's been loyal.
He's been loyal, and they haven't done anything to help him necessarily. Right. So it's about time.
Right.
And so
what's confusing now to me is, like, I understand him selecting the Miami Heat as one of the options or preferred options for him to move to, but his second option was the Brooklyn Nets,
right?
Which did not make sense to me. Like, what do you make of that?
Well, for what Dame wants, obviously he wants to go out there and get a ring. And as I mentioned before, even with him, maybe they're a little bit into the playoffs.
Maybe
playoffs.
They're 7 or 8
They're at least a play-in team, but
right.
I don't know. Why would you want to go somewhere to just be in the play-in?
Right. Well, why don't you just stay in Portland?
Exactly. Why don't you just stay in Portland?
Would be a better team than the Nets.
Exactly.
Right?
The only thing that I think that the Nets have. Maybe this might not be true, but the Nets might have a little bit more trade value.
Well, they have the trade assets.
Yeah.
I think, from front office perspective, as far as the Portland Trailblazers are concerned, if you're going to pick a team to trade with, you would rather trade with the Nets. I mean, they certainly have the draft capital. They have some, interesting young players on their
Claxton.
team. Yeah. So, I mean, if you're going to make a trade, I almost feel like, Lillard didn't say the Brooklyn Nets. I almost feel like the front office is saying, he wants to go to the Brooklyn Nets because that's who they would rather, deal with, negotiate with. But, Miami Heat would be interesting. Although,
I feel like,
although it would depend on what the Heat would have to give up. This is sort of in line with what we were speaking about last time we got together, is the depth, right? The Suns lost all their depth to obtain Beal. How much of the current roster would the Heat have to give up in order to acquire Damian Lillard? And quite frankly, I don't think they have the assets to acquire Lillard straight up. They're probably going to have to involve a third team because certainly they don't have the draft capital. I think I read someplace that if they're trading picks, the first round picks would have to be like 2026 and 2028. So, I mean, that's far down the line, I don't know that Portland's interested in something that far out in the future. So who knows? Maybe the Nets are the third team to sort of facilitate.
Yeah, I was just about to say that there is talks that the Nets are the third team,
right?
And that they're working a deal to potentially get Claxton or maybe some other pieces over to Portland. And Tyler Hero actually ending up on the Nets,
right?
And Damian Lillard obviously ending up on the Heat. But I feel like in this situation, obviously it's a business, but morally they owe Dame. They should just give Dame what he wants and just bite the bullet for him after all he's done for Portland in these past few, or not even few, like these past years that he's been on the team. I think the Heat, although they don't have the best draft capital, the best assets on the market, they could still make a deal happen to get Dame on the team. I think obviously the trade, if it was straight up, would be around Tyler Hero and Kyle Lowry being involved in those trades. As disappointing as Kyle Lowry has been for the Heat, as much as he's fallen off the face of the earth on end of basketball, he still would probably be a good mentor for the player we talked about last time, Scoot Henderson.
Right.
Kyle Lowry proved to be a really good leader on that Raptors run, and I think that it wouldn't hurt him that bad. I also think that if let's say you get the Nets involved, you'd probably give up Yusuf Nurkic as well within that deal if you're the Blazers. You would try and get Nicholas Claxton, maybe a few assets from the Nets. Maybe you could still land Kyle Lowry. Tyler Hero ends up on the Nets. Damian Lillard on the Heat. I think that works well for all teams involved. And I feel like it's interesting, but I think that the Blazers, regardless of what it may be, should allow Dame to end up where he asked to end up in Miami because of what he's done for them.
So although this is not a what-if topic, but what if Damian Lillard goes to the Heat? Wow. And what if the Heat are able to build a reasonable supporting cast around him? So let's consider, obviously, Jimmy Butler will still be there, teaming up with Damian Lillard. You still have Bam. Mm-hmm. I figured that would be the three-person core of the team. And let's say, you have a decent array of other players in the starting lineup and a bench. Where does that put the Heat in the Eastern Conference?
With this topic, let's talk about what happened to the Heat this offseason.
Okay.
So they lose two key pieces in their last couple finals, Eastern Conference Finals runs. Right. Max Strus and Gabe Vincent, who especially this past season proved to be huge pieces in their finals run. Max Strus went to the Cleveland Cavaliers, and Gabe Vincent went to the Los Angeles Lakers. However, the Heat are able to sign back Josh Richardson, who had the best years of his career on the Miami Heat, who's ultimately actually traded for Jimmy Butler in the sign-and-trade deal, getting Jimmy Butler from the Philadelphia 76ers. And they were able to sign Thomas Bryant, who, funny enough, was a part of the Nuggets team this past season, right, off the bench, who didn't really get a big role, but when he was on the Washington Wizards, he showed to be a very promising stretch five, which is a problem that the Heat have had these past seasons, not having enough height or not enough three-point shooting, and they were able to land back Kevin Love.
Right.
And so I think the Heat do have a lot of strong pieces. The only thing that I would want them to land would be a backup point guard, because hypothetically Kyle Lowry would be in this deal for Damian Lillard, and as we talk about, point guards are important.
Right.
And so if they're able to land Kyle Lowry, let's say they give up picks, Kyle Lowry, Tyler Hero, and the Nikola Jovic piece, who they drafted 2 seasons ago in the NBA draft. Let's say that's the trade with draft capital. They still have a lot of good pieces. They still have their draft pick from this year, Jaime Jaquez Jr. from UCLA, who's in the small forward spot, pretty good three-point shooter. I feel like the Heat, with Jimmy Butler, with Damian Lillard, and with Bam Adebayo, make it at least to the Eastern Conference Finals. We saw last season that Jimmy Butler played his heart out for, let's say, the first 2.5 series of that playoffs until he got tired, and then kind of he just played tired, missed a lot of bad shots, and he carried the team on his back. But when you have Damian Lillard, who's a 32 points per game player and who is shown to be a strong playoff performer, I think that that's the missing piece of the team. Somebody to pick up where Jimmy Butler needs help.
Right.
Because Jimmy Butler, frankly, isn't a scorer. Right. He can get buckets. His name is Jimmy Buckets, but he's not. That's not his thing necessarily.
Right. No, certainly Damian Lillard would take a lot of the scoring pressure off of Butler.
Right. And I don't think Jimmy Butler wants to be that first option. He makes it clear he just wants to help the team win.
Right.
It's not his thing to go out there and score 56 points, pull down 9 rebounds, and only get 2 assists.
Right.
He wants the team to win.
Right.
By any means necessary. And Bam isn't a scorer. Jimmy Butler can score.
Right.
And I think Kyle Lowry was just pretty much a waste of space on the court on the Heat.
Right.
Dame fits what they need perfectly.
Right. So.
And I think that would be the piece to either win them the finals or bring them back to where they were last year and see where it goes from there.
So I think we fixed everything for the Heat. We fixed things for the Suns. We'll probably see them both in the finals next year.
Yeah.
So long as they follow.
As long as they follow what we said.
Exactly. So let's get away from the NBA. I think we spoke enough about the NBA at this point. Something that I caught in the news that I found interesting was sort of sports related. I mean, I guess we all watch ESPN every day, about how ESPN is trying to, become more fiscally responsible. And in order to do that, they've been getting rid of some of their online talent. I was just reading, Jalen Rose, Keyshawn Johnson. I think, what's his name?
Kellerman?
Max Kellerman is gone. What's his name? Jay
Wright?
Jay Williams.
Jay Williams.
Jay Williams is I think his contract is expiring. So what are your thoughts on this big turnover that's that's going on as we speak over at ESPN? Any thoughts?
Well, I think for ESPN, I've seen this a lot with a lot of television companies. Is people tend to get laid off because they cost too much. Right. I don't think that these guys will have trouble finding jobs in the future, wherever they may work. But I feel like the ESPN wants to keep their main core. Obviously, they're
Stephen A.
Yeah, obviously they're paying him a lot of money, even though he might be a little, special. But he
could be annoying.
Yep. I think that they're just trying to maybe even make it a younger thing too. Just hire younger people, newer voices.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised too if some of them came back. Mm-hmm. I think that part of what they're trying to do is let certain contracts expire. They're buying out certain contracts, and I think if they are interested in some of the the talent that they're getting rid of now, they'll sort of renegotiate deals with them and bring them back at a more economical rate, I guess. So we'll see what happens with ESPN, but I'm sure they'll still be,
Yeah, and on this topic too, like even a lot in the esports field as well, which is something that I've kind of developed recent interest on. There's a big company called the 100 Thieves. They're a gaming team, and they had to lay off a lot of their famous gamers because they had to pay them a lot of money. Like these, it's a big deal, like how much money these people make, and sometimes you don't want to pay them that much.
Right.
And there's a lot of younger, probably cheaper people too out there. So yeah, that's probably what they're doing. They're just trying to reassess what they want for their company, and they think that as long as they keep their main guys, as we said, Stephen A. Smith, they still have something there. It's just a matter of who they want to renegotiate with, who's getting too much money for what they think, or whatever it may be, and we'll see what they do going forward.
Well, let's touch on baseball now that we touched on ESPN. Leading up to today, I was going to retract one of my statements from the last show that we did, and that I thought the Mets still had an outside shot, that this season wasn't over yet, and I initially thought of starting the show with a retraction of that statement, but then the Mets have to go out and win the last 2 games, and get my hopes up again. But what's incredible to me, I think, although they are, let's take a look. What are the standings right now in the National League? Well, what's incredible is there's not one player that's hitting really well. The highest batting average on the team is like 280, and it's Pham and Nimmo. I think Pham is the highest batting average on the team right now at around 280, and I think Nimmo's batting average has dropped below 280 at this point. They're not hitting. They haven't necessarily pitched well either. Certainly their bullpen has been absolutely horrendous. And, losing Diaz for the season did not help the situation at all. I mean, what they're trying to hold down the bullpen with is basically the support that they had signed to pitch in front of Diaz, to the bridge to get to Diaz. Robertson, certainly 38 years old, is not the same pitcher that he was a number of years ago. Certainly still a decent relief pitcher, but not a great pitcher, not a great relief pitcher. But what I found interesting was, despite the fact that the Mets are still 8 games below 500, they're still I think like 8 games behind in the final wild card spot. So I mean that is achievable. But the most interesting stat to me, despite the fact that they're 8 games under, their run differential is only -12, which means they're losing a lot of close games, which means the bullpen is really costing them these games. If they could just bolster their bullpen where they could hold leads. I mean, how many times have we discussed, even over the last week?
Yeah.
The
Mets
they had
lost
the
this
lead.
one.
Yeah, I can't believe they just lost this game.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm not retracting my statement from the last show. I still think they still have a shot at this. Maybe just wishful thinking on my part, but well, let's see what happens the balance of the year. Certainly, the Atlanta Braves have continued to play really well. I think, as of right now, they're probably the best team in the league. Certainly, Tampa Bay has been consistent throughout the season, although they're sort of, coming back down to earth and just, not playing, godlike baseball right now. They're just a regular team. I think they're 5-5 over the last 10 games. American League Central, horrendous division. Minnesota, 1 game under 500, is in first place. Unlike the American League East, Boston Red Sox, who were in last place in the East, are a game over 500. So Texas Rangers still holding on to the lead in the
Bit
West.
of a close fight there, though.
Yeah, but Houston is making its move, and I think Texas is beginning to falter a little bit. Like I said the last time, I think they're playing a little bit above their heads. Again, the Central Division in the National League, sort of like the Central Division in the American League. It's, to me, the weakest division in the National League, as Central Division is the weakest in the American League as well. 6 games over. Milwaukee Brewers is in the lead there. The Reds, Pirates, Cubs, Cardinals, a little bit surprising how poorly they're performing.
Yeah, that's surprising to me too. Like, they're the worst team in their division.
But, again, interesting stat for them too is similar to the Mets. They're 13 games under 500, but they're only -24 in the run differential. So again, they're a team that seems to be losing a lot of close games. Diamondbacks leading the West right now. Dodgers close second. Giants playing well this season. So I think still most of the divisions are up in the air. It'll be interesting to see, post All-Star break, which is coming up, and then post trade deadline, how things end up in the 2023 Major League Baseball season. So,
certainly.
The other thing regarding baseball that I wanted to touch on was, since it may have been a day or two after our last show, we recorded Domingo Germán of the Yankees pitched a perfect game.
Against the Oakland A's.
So you got to take that with a grain of salt. But then again,
it's a perfect game, but it's just the least important perfect game.
But perfect games are hard to throw.
Yeah.
Right? Not only does the pitcher have to pitch very well,
the defense has to back him up.
The defense has to back him up. Nobody can make a mistake. Right? So what's really, really interesting is that in the history of baseball, since what they call the modern age of baseball. Modern age of baseball is considered 1903, when the World Series was created and the pitching rules changed. Prior to 1903, there was no overhand pitching. It was all underhand. There was no balls and strikes. But anyway, so modern day of baseball started in 1903. From 1903, so 1903, that's what, 120 years?
Yep.
In 120 years of baseball history, there have only been 24 perfect games ever pitched. So it's got to be one of the most difficult accomplishments in sport, in any sport. Well, what I found interesting, the fact that there's only been 24 ever thrown, 4 have been thrown by Yankees, including Domingo Germán last week.
Yeah.
Also for the Yankees was David Cohn and David Wells, who each threw their perfect games a season apart, almost 14 months apart. And the last one for the Yankees prior to that, obviously I'm forgetting, gosh, I'm like losing my mind. Don Larson in the World Series. He's the only one to throw one in the postseason.
Mm-hmm.
So I found that really interesting how the Yankees ended up, being the team to throw 4 of the 24 perfect games.
And another interesting fact is all their names start with D.
Is that right? Don Larson.
Domingo Germán.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yep. So there must be some sort of thing going on. But yeah, no, it's very interesting. I mean, I feel like we never even see no hitters either. There's maybe one a season. It's obviously more common than a perfect game, but still, that's out of 123 years. There's only been 24.
Yeah, it's incredible.
One in the postseason too.
Yeah.
So then that means about 23 of them are only in the regular season.
Right. And then from baseball, maybe a little golf. Last time we spoke, we were talking about the U.S. Open, how I was disappointed in Ricky Fowler not being able to hold the lead. Ricky Fowler yesterday finally won a tournament for the first time in 4 years or so.
Yeah.
Good for him. He actually birdied the 18th hole to tie Morikawa, and then birdied the first extra hole to win yesterday. So good for Ricky Fowler. Hopefully he has more. I mean, he's been playing really well.
Right. He fell off for quite a while too.
Yeah. I think, he got married. He had his baby. I think he was a little bit focused on other things for a period of time. Hopefully now he can focus a little bit more on golf, and he'll continue the success that that he's seen so far this year, and that'll continue for the balance of the year and in the future. Let's see. Also, big news this week is tennis. Wimbledon started today.
Right.
Any thoughts on tennis?
Well, the big thought is Novak Djokovic, right? He's hands down probably the best player right now. Obviously, there's some competition, but obviously he's the favorite going into this.
So what is it? I think he's going for his 25th major, which would break. Well, he already leads all men, and I think he would break the women's record as well, as far as major championships are concerned. Good for him, but I'm a little bit tired of watching him win. I'm sort of rooting for this new kid, Carlos Alcaraz, who played Djokovic, I think, in the semifinals at, I think the French Open was the last one, and I thought for sure that passing of the torch was going to happen then, but Alcaraz cramped up and turned out not to be much of a contest. Hopefully, if they meet again head to head, this time Carlos Alcaraz will not have any sort of physical ailment that deters him from playing his best, and hopefully, the passing of the torch. I think I'm done with Nadal, Djokovic, and Federer's retired now, so I'll sort of finish with them winning all the time.
Right, and you could even say before, I don't remember what year it was, but when Djokovic beat Federer in one of the majors, even Djokovic said, "Thank you for letting me win."
Yeah.
Right, so I feel like that was another passing of the torch moment there, and with these younger, more and up-and-coming players, that it's bound to happen.
Right.
So it's just a matter of time right now before Alcaraz comes in, maybe beats Djokovic, and we'll see what happens.
On the women's side, Iga Swiatek, she is the dominant female player. She just won the French Open. She's the defending U.S. Open champion right now. So I fully expect her to win. Actually won the French Open. I think she only lost one set. So I think she will probably be dominant. Another slow surface. She's proven that she could win on slow surfaces. She won a U.S. Open last year, so she could play on the fast courts as well. All around, really, really good player. Other news on the women's side, I think she's 43 years old now. Venus Williams, despite the fact that Serena has already retired, Venus refuses to. She's still going. She's still a big name. I think she's a 7-time major champion. So big name. But I think, she's probably a one and done in the tournament, as she has been more recently, especially in majors.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
So I think we've touched upon a bunch of stuff. Do we want to touch upon a what if? We've been kicking around what ifs
for a while.
Yeah. Is there a what if that you wanted to discuss today?
Yeah. Well, we talked a lot about basketball, but I feel like my what if I feel like he's almost the face of what ifs in recent sports history. It would be Derrick Rose. Recently signed with the Grizzlies after not having any play time with the Knicks, but will he even have play time with the Grizzlies? We'll never know. But he's the biggest what if. He was the youngest MVP ever in 2011 and in sports.
He was so good back then, right?
He was so good. He averaged 25 points, almost 8 assists that year. But the stats don't matter. What matters is he is the youngest MVP in 2011. He had one more good year, and then he injured himself.
Right.
He got injured, tore his ACL, and he almost has never been the same since. He had 3 back-to-back-to-back All-Star seasons, one of those obviously being the one where he won his MVP, and then after that he never was an All-Star again. And his career slowly started to decline. He was a good starter. Then he became a good bench player, and now he's lucky if he sees minutes.
So what we're talking about, regarding this topic specifically, we're talking about how, Jimmy Butler was on those Bulls teams. Does Jimmy Butler become the Jimmy Butler that we know today if D Rose never got hurt?
Right.
Would Jimmy Butler have flourished playing with a dominant D Rose that never diminished
So the thing about Jimmy Butler's career is he started his first 2 or 3 or so seasons not even seeing the court. Thibodeau didn't give him a shot, and he tells the story quite often about like it pissed him off. Like
Right.
he knew he had it in him. He's a hard worker, as we've seen from him. And then he finally got to see minutes, playing with Derrick Rose, and he started to come up and whatever it may be. And he was, I believe, the 2014-2015 most improved player. But by that time, Derrick Rose was already starting his decline.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's hard to say because it's a what if.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say we do get to see it. Let's assume, right? Let's make this imaginary situation in our heads. The Bulls were making the playoffs. They were making it far, only losing really to, LeBron's Heat.
Those were good teams, right?
Yeah.
They had Noah at center.
Joakim Noah in his prime, Carlos Boozer,
Right.
Luol Deng.
Right.
Jimmy
they
Butler.
were a
Derrick
loaded
Rose.
team.
They were loaded.
They were loaded.
I'm pretty sure Kirk Heinrich came off the bench.
Yeah.
Like, they were quite a team, and they would work that Heat team.
Right.
LeBron's Heat back in the day. But I think Jimmy Butler's career aside, I think that they eventually become the team in the East. I feel like they are the ones who make it to the finals every year.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly out of that, I believe they get a ring or two.
Right. No, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
and
that's a great what if.
Yeah, it's a great what if, and it would 100%, I feel like, undoubtedly change what the NBA looks like today.
Right. Then briefly, one more time, we'll get back into tennis a little bit. Another what if that we were kicking around this morning was Naomi Osaka.
Mm-hmm.
What if Naomi Osaka didn't lose her mind?
Right.
She was certainly one of the bright up-and-coming female tennis stars. Not just female, just a tennis star.
Just a tennis star.
Yeah. Won 4 major championships early, 2 Australian, 2 U.S. Open. And then, I don't know, something broke.
Well, she isn't tough
Yeah.
right here. And tennis is a mental sport.
Right.
What was it? Somebody's like, Naomi, you suck, or something like that.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
she broke down, right? And I feel like that, as you say, her losing her mind, that switch was always there.
Mm-hmm.
It was only a matter of time. It was either going to make her or break her.
Right.
And it broke her.
Right. But, like, the first major she won was the U.S. Open, the one that she played against Serena Williams.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly the crowd was not rooting for
that's
her.
right.
They were
I remember
rooting
this
for
one, yeah.
Serena. To me, that was a really tough match for anybody to win, to overcome
How everybody's
how
against
everybody is rooting for the other player. So to me, it was really surprising that she broke. To overcome, really for your first major title where everybody's rooting against you almost, and you still overcome that and win. To me, you have mental toughness. So I really don't know what happened. She's still young. She's still in her 20s. I think she's still like 26, 27 years old. Hopefully, this what if is not,
what a
finished.
usual what if is,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Like, what ifs are
Hopefully-
when things don't actually pan out.
Right.
She won't be a what if she could eventually come back around and,
Right.
and win some
I know
things.
she's with child now, so she'll give birth, and she too will be reborn as a tennis star and come back and flourish again. But we shall see. Maybe we'll root for that too.
Right.
Anything else, or should we wrap this up this week?
Let's wrap this up right now. So
Okay.
This was a good talk, and we're going to be back in about a week with the freshest sports news. I'm Trey.
And I'm Fred.
And we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining. Bye-bye.